Our normally scheduled programming will not be seen at this time, so that we may present the following 10 NBC special.
The founder of the Eastman Kodak Company called it home. Set in the heart of Rochester, George Eastman began building his estate in 1902. Surrounded by farmlands, the mansion featured formal gardens, greenhouses, and barns. Mr. Eastman lived here until his death in 1932. It was opened to the public in 1949. Inside, you'll find a world-renowned museum of photography and motion pictures. Tonight, we reveal the many historical and personal treasures at 900 East Avenue. 10 NBC salutes the golden anniversary. Come along and celebrate 50 years of George Eastman House. Here are your hosts, Janet Lomax and Gabe Dalmuth.
Good evening and welcome.
George Eastman is known as the father of photography. His idea to preserve the image of the moment and make the process simple for everyone.
The image of Eastman and his legacy live on in our community and here at this house.
Let's give you the grand tour. Kathy, why did Mr. Eastman build this home?
Well, Mr. Eastman built the house for his mom. She was ailing when they moved in, but he wanted her last few years to be nice, and so he wanted a place with household staff and a nice place to entertain in.
But it did not always look like this.
No, it didn't. Prior to 1990, the house really had very few original furnishings in it, and all of the original plaster work, the draperies, the carpets had been removed. And until we did the restoration in the late 1980s, the rooms didn't look anything like Mr. Eastman had left behind.
What kinds of things did George Eastman do in this room?
Well, Mr. Eastman loved to entertain, and music was a very important part of his entertaining, so he regularly would start dinner evenings with music here in the living room with piano. Usually a chamber music orchestra would perform. And then at the end of the evening, they would have a dinner and then a sing-along. He also, though, took dance lessons in this room and had the carpet rolled up. We've read about that in some of his letters, and he actually tried to learn some of the popular dances of the 20s. Well, Mr. Eastman had quite an extensive collection of old master paintings, and there's some Rembrandts and some Barbizon School, some beautiful landscapes and portraits.
I think there's an interesting story when you talk about the paintings and his instructions to his staff in case of fire.
That's right. Mr. Eastman could replace pretty much anything in the house that he owned except the master paintings, because many of those artists had been dead for years. So he had a special procedure written up for all his household staff. In case of a fire, paintings from the living room, and in particular the billiard would be removed to the front of the house, and then the firefighters would know which other paintings to save after that.
This is a beautiful room. Show me more of the home.
Okay.
Kathy, when you walk into the conservatory, you can't miss the elephant.
Yeah, it's one of the largest artifacts in the Eastman collection, actually. It's a reproduction from George Eastman's second African safari, and he brought it back in 1928, so it's been hanging in this room most of the rest of his life and most of the museum history.
Tell me about the ivory, the tusks.
Well, Mr. Eastman's trophy was not a perfect one. It only had one ivory tusk, so he had that mounted and specially displayed on the floor below. And then he had two fake wooden tusks put and painted to look like ivory and hung on the wall. And that's what we did when we did the restoration.
This conservatory is beautiful, but it wasn't always this size.
That's correct. Mr. Eastman enlarged the room by about 10 feet, and we believe that was to accommodate more people at the musicales and at various balls and parties that he had here regularly. It cost him $750,000 to do that 10-foot expansion because he had a house with a hole in the middle for almost 3 months. He had to find and match the brick to the outside wall. He also had to rehook the plumbing, the electrical, the heating to basically make it one unit.
Kathy, what kinds of things took place in the conservatory?
Well, one of the key elements in the room was music, and it was the Aeolian pipe organ that's right behind you that Mr. Eastman used regularly. The pipe organ was installed when he first moved in 1905, but the pipes are everywhere in the entire house, so you hear it on the first, second, and third floor. The pipe organs are actually hidden behind lattice work on all the different levels. And he would regularly dine breakfast and dinner in this room if he was dining by himself or with small groups. So in many cases, the organ was not only background music, but it was also his alarm clock. In the morning, Harold Gleason, his first organist, would actually come in and start playing the pipe organ as Mr. Eastman descended the stairs from his bedroom.
Now, I've noticed a lot of plants in the room, and especially in front of the organ.
That's right. We believe that Mr. Eastman was bothered by the noise of the organist's feet when he was pushing all the pedals. So they say that he had this tier built and had all kinds of tropical plants and seasonal plants put on during the year.
In his will, Mr. Eastman left most of his fortune as well as this home to the University of Rochester. 2 presidents from the U of R lived in the house prior to its opening as a memorial to Eastman in 1949. We'll continue our house tour a little later. We'll show you Mr. Eastman's fine china and where he played pool.
Many of us have places we keep our favorite mementos. You know, there are 60,000 treasures in George Eastman's collection. The new Archive and Study Center opens to the public next month.
George Eastman House receives hundreds of requests for information a year. Because of this, the museum wanted a place for people to do research in a central location. In this temperature-controlled vault, you'll find Eastman's personal photographs and letters, shelves of patents, even his camping equipment. There are also invitations and letters from the White House.
We have probably, I'd say maybe 30 to 40 letters from presidents of the United States, and some of them are doing business. When Mr. Eastman returned money to the U.S. government after World War I, it was profits that he had made with Kodak sales, basically, and equipment during the war effort.
Many of the original pieces from Mr. Eastman's office at Kodak are still around.
We actually could recreate Mr. Eastman's office. We have his beautiful roll-top desk, and we have a great office chair, a swivel chair that he used that's of black leather. We have his original wastebasket and even a phone. It's like a big piece of furniture. It would be to the exact height of the side of his desk. And you basically had to call your operator at that point, and they would place the call for you, either to the east or the west side of the river.
Inside the Archive Center, you'll find a lot of items that show a different side of Mr. Eastman.
Mr. Eastman was a fly fisherman, and we have some wonderful things, pictures and manuscripts talking about all the things that he bought and purchased, and he was a sort of like a test for many of these companies. Abercrombie & Fitch would send him things to try out.
Some of the items in the collection were taken from the house after Eastman's death.
Many people in the community have been very generous about returning objects that they had received from the Eastman House over, its history. When Mr. Eastman died, he basically left his entire house and most of the contents to the University of Rochester. But many pieces that the university didn't want, or that household staff that worked for Mr. Eastman wanted, they took, and they could do that.
While the objects in the collection are valuable, so are the stories about the man himself. Kathy Connor, George Eastman House curator, is always looking to talk to people who knew Eastman. Connor recently interviewed the daughter of Mr. Eastman's chauffeur. Eastman bought her back a doll from his trip to Japan in 1920.
She also had one of Mr. Eastman's chili sauce recipes. It was something that, no one had documented, no one would have known, but her mother was a great cook and had asked for the recipe and had made the chili sauce. But it's one of those things where it's a fun kind of thing that shows a different side of Mr. Eastman, and I think all of those things now become information in the collection that we can then share with the public.
You can even do research on genealogy about relatives who worked at Kodak during Eastman's lifetime. Using computers in the study center, you may find a letter that Eastman wrote to one of your relatives or a patent they worked on.
Seeing is believing. Find out how Mr. Eastman and inventor Thomas Edison surprised some party guests back in 1928.
Plus the Brownie camera and famous photographers coming up.
Where did the name Kodak come from? Eastman came up with the name while playing Scrabble. He wanted something short and something easy to pronounce in all languages. He started with K because his mother's maiden name was Kilborn. The K at the end sounds like a click, like the click in the original Kodak camera. This 10 NBC special presentation is brought to you by Eastman Kodak Company, St. John Fisher College, Rowe Photographic Video and Audio, Thomas R. Paddock Oriental Rug Exchange, the Industrial Management Council, Cornell's Jewelers, Nazareth College, and Chase Manhattan Bank.
All the world over, so easy to see. People everywhere just got to be free.
Thousands of people are free to spend less time with their money and more time with their honey. With new
Moment is brought to you by Thomas R. Paddock Oriental Rugs.
Hi, I'm Tom Bavenzi with...
Hello, I'm Sandy Parker. IMC would like to congratulate our neighbor here on East Avenue, George Eastman House, on its 50th anniversary. Mr. Eastman's wish was that Rochester would be one of the finest cities in which to live, work, and raise a family. The best way to accomplish this is for business to give back to the community. Today, the IMC continues to share Mr. Eastman's dream by supporting more than 400 employers in our area. IMC congratulates George Eastman House on its 50th anniversary.
Hello, I'm David Cornell. George Eastman House holds a special memory for me when I was on a third-grade field trip. A security guard showed me a panel under a third-floor staircase. The guard opened the panel, and behind it there was a secret safe belonging to Mr. Eastman. I was so excited, and to this day, it remains a cherished memory. A hidden treasure discovered. Rochesterians have found their own hidden treasures at Cornell Jewelers. We invite you to visit George Eastman House during its 50th anniversary.
In the spring of 1998, George Eastman House began recreating the front lawn to what it looked like from 1916 until 1932. Landscapers planted shrubs and trees using pictures for accuracy. The 4 gardens surrounding the museum are open to the public from May until October. In the terrace garden in 1928, George Eastman and inventor Thomas Edison debuted the first color motion picture at the Kodak Color Party. Eastman filmed the guests in the morning. They saw themselves on film later that day.
Welcome back to the Golden Anniversary Special of George Eastman House. 130,000 visitors come here every year. If you've never been here, you don't know what you're missing. Let's continue our house tour. Kathy, the dining room is beautiful as well. I noticed that the china that's on the table is the original china.
Well, yes, we're fortunate that we have Mr. Eastman's original set of Minton china on loan from his relatives, at least for the next couple of years. We're hoping they'll eventually give it to the museum, but it is a beautiful set and it has his monogram on every one of the pieces. About 85% of what you see in the historic home today is original to Mr. Eastman's time period.
What would a typical meal be?
Mr. Eastman didn't have a typical meal. He had some very elaborate meals when he was entertaining a lot of his family and also a lot of the business associates. Yet on the evenings of the musicales, when he had 75 to 100 people, you might get beer and corned beef hash and some bread. So I'm not sure that was typical, but he needed to throw something together to feed a lot of people.
And this is the billiard room. This looks like George Eastman would have enjoyed this room.
Yeah, Mr. Eastman did spend a lot of time playing billiards with close friends and also listening to music on his Edison cylinder phonograph and the radios that he had in the room. One of the other things that he had in here was a master clock system, which basically had an individual clock in every room run by the one on the second floor, telephone system which connected most of the 22 rooms in the house by intercom or phone. He also had a special push-button light system to turn on the lights in the room, different sections, and a central vacuuming system, which we all would love to have in our house today. And it was to clean not only the billiard table, but also some of the special velvet furniture and the animal skins that you see in the room.
And the library is off the billiard room?
Yes, if you follow me this way, we'll go right to it.
Now, he loved to read, didn't he?
Yeah, he had quite an extensive collection of first edition books and a variety of how-to books. In fact, we found a book on how to play contract bridge, how to milk cows in a more efficient manner, all kinds of things atypical of what you'd expect for someone in the photographic industry.
Such knowledge in this library, and it amazes me that he was a self-made man.
Well, he really didn't have a lot of formal education, that's correct. He left school when he was like between 13 and 14 years of age because his father had just died and he needed to help support his mom and his 2 younger sisters. So in reality, that's correct. He read and he traveled, and that's really how he learned.
One of the questions asked most often on the house tour is, why didn't George Eastman marry? Well, Mr. Eastman had women friends, but their careers took them in different directions, and as Eastman made more money, he became less trusting of people's affections toward him. Oh, and one final thing before we finish our house tour. They plan on renovating a second-floor bedroom from a photograph they found recently.
And Janet, that photograph could very well have been taken by one of these cameras. This is the Mies Gallery that traces the history of photography and cinematography. There are more than 25,000 artifacts in the technology collection. Most of the items are kept 2 floors down in a climate-controlled vault. Let's head down there now to see how photography got its start in 1839.
This is the Giroux daguerreotype camera. It would be the first manufactured and sold commercial camera. This particular camera actually belonged to Daguerre, who is one of the gentlemen who's credited with inventing photography.
In 1888 came the Kodak, and the famous phrase, "You push the button and we do the rest."
Very simple in operation. The shutter is cocked by lifting up on this string. Sometimes they're called string set Kodaks. There is no viewfinder on the camera. It's basically a point-and-shoot camera. You point it where you want to photograph and just push the little shutter release. In 1900, Eastman comes out with a camera that sold for $1. They called it the Brownie camera. It was named for the Brownie cartoon character, which is shown here on the box. The camera was originally marketed towards children, although adults bought it. So it opens photography up to just about anybody who wanted to make an image. This is an anniversary speed graphic camera. It would have been made during the war years. In fact, this particular camera was used to document the D-Day invasion by the Allied forces.
An out-of-this-world camera in the collection is the Lunar Orbiter camera. It's like the cameras that took pictures of the moon for NASA.
This particular unit was not used. What this is, though, basically is a combination of camera, processing lab, and television studio.
And the scanned image sent back to Earth looked something like this.
Also in the technology collection, the camera that Joe Rosenthal used in 1945 to capture the flag raising on Iwo Jima. This photograph is one of thousands in the photography collection. It is the most comprehensive collection in the world.
The best thing about photography, why it was so embraced by modern culture, is that the ability to create multiples. It is Talbot's invention of the paper negative and the paper positive, and be able to create multiples from that paper negative.
Two artists considered photographic masters of the 20th century are Alfred Stieglitz and Edward Weston. In this image, Stieglitz photographs groups of immigrants on a steerage back to Europe.
For him, it really didn't have a social content so much as it did an artistic or aesthetic content. And Weston takes it a step further. Another 20 years in his work, that's the Nautilus. You see where he's interested in pure form, and he gets rid of all extraneous materials.
This permanent exhibit, called Through the Lens, also has a large collection of photojournalism, including that of photographer Eddie Adams. This chilling image from 1968, titled "Viet Cong Executed," is among the most memorable from the Vietnam War.
The museum also holds the entire career's work of world-renowned photographer Alvin Langdon Coburn, from his photographs to personal letters and papers. Coburn's photographs are currently on display in one of the exhibits. Everyone loves to go to the movies, and we'll tell you why Eastman House plays a part in what you see on the big screen, and find out which Hollywood stars store their films here.
Apparently lonely and suffering from arthritis of the spine, George Eastman killed himself in March of 1932. He shot himself in the heart in his bedroom. In his suicide note, he wrote, "To my friends, my work is done. Why wait? G.E." George Eastman was 77.
I'm Catherine Keogh, president of St. John Fisher College. We're proud to salute the vision of George Eastman here at the Eastman House. He was a man with drive, passion. 50th anniversary.
Hello, I'm Richard.
This George Eastman House 50th anniversary moment is brought to you by Thomas R. Paddock Oriental Rugs.
Hi, I'm Tom Eastman House.
Is everything.
Welcome back. We're in the Dryden Theater. It's attached to the back of the house. The theater was built in 1950 and named after Eastman's niece, Ellen Dryden.
People come here and watch films on the big screen. Now, what you may not know is in the basement of the museum is one of the world's oldest and largest motion picture archives. These are the motion picture vaults, and without this facility, classics like Gone with the Wind would never make it to the big screen.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
The original negative is stored at Eastman House. From the original, Hollywood made the new enhanced print.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Even the Yellow Brick Road begins at Eastman House. The original Technicolor negative for the Wizard of Oz is in the collection. The archives hold around 23,000 films, with one of the world's largest collections of silent films. Hollywood director Martin Scorsese not only keeps the films he's directed in these vaults,
but films from his own private collection.
We have a Hitchcock film here, I Confess, a great Western, Johnny Guitar, 1954. What else? We have a great Japanese film, Sancho the Bailiff. It's like, you know, being like a kid in a candy store. Every time students and scholars come here, they are in awe because there are so many films they have never seen. These are films that are selected by Mr. Scorsese, so these films represent what Scorsese likes about cinema.
To prevent damage, the movie prints must be kept in cold storage. This vault is kept at around 40 degrees and the humidity must be low. In case of a power outage, there are backup generators for most of the vaults. Director Spike Lee stores his collection of movies here as well, including the only print of Malcolm X on 17mm film. Preserving one film can cost thousands, even millions of dollars. Vertigo, starring Jimmy Stewart, cost $1.5 million to restore.
Protecting films is not as easy as it looks. What we see on the big screen is nothing but the result of a long, painstaking, and very expensive business.
Private donors and foundations, along with government agencies like the National Endowment for the Arts, help pay for film restoration. George Eastman's own home movies are kept in the archives, along with actress Joan Crawford's.
We realized after our first inspection that these films were actually made by Joan Crawford when she was given a camera as a Christmas present.
Crawford's home movies are waiting to be preserved, and so are many others.
And considering that we have many films that are in threat of disappearing forever, then we have to figure out which films are the rarest, which ones are the most important, and it's a difficult choice.
From rare films to rare legends in Hollywood, people like Fred Astaire and Jimmy Stewart have sat in these seats.
Since 1955, Eastman House has given the George Eastman Award to actors, directors, and cinematographers who make a contribution to film and its preservation. The most recent winner was actress Isabella Rossellini. Hollywood legend Audrey Hepburn came to Rochester in 1992 to accept the honor, and Lauren Bacall won the award in 1990. The award will be given out this fall, but this year's winner remains a secret.
Well, it's no secret that the museum's director is proud of all that's been done to share George Eastman and his work with the world.
And you'll hear from Tony Bannon up next.
Fire destroyed more than 320 original movie negatives after a blaze broke out on the grounds of Eastman House in May of 1978. The fire started in a converted incinerator used to store old movies. Nitrate chemicals spontaneously combusted. 2 nearby buildings caught fire, one that stored machinery, and the other housed traveling exhibits. Damages totaled $1 million.
Hello, I'm David Cornell. George Eastman House holds a special memory for me. George Eastman House during its 50th anniversary.
Hello,
I'm C. Congratulates George Eastman House on its 50th anniversary.
I'm Catherine. Discover the qualities that made George Eastman a visionary in our community. We at Fisher congratulate George Eastman House on their 50th anniversary.
This 10 NBC special presentation is brought to you by Eastman Kodak Company, St. John Fisher College, Rowe Photographic Video and Audio, Thomas R. Paddock Oriental Rug Exchange, the Industrial Management Council, Cornell's Jewelers, Nazareth College, and Chase Manhattan Bank.
Eastman House director Tony Bannon has been at the helm for 3 years. He's proud of the accessibility to this museum.
I must say we're already very good at it. We did an interview with Forbes magazine, and the interviewer said in disbelief to us over and over again, you know, if I come to George Eastman House, all I have to do is announce myself and I can visit the archives and look at your collection. And we said, of course. Now, people may not be used to that kind of generosity of spirit elsewhere, but in Rochester, that's the way we do business, and we'll be doing an even better job of it going forward.
So often when friends come to Rochester, this is one of the first places you want to bring them.
Everyone loves to take pictures, so everyone can relate to the things in this house, and it's such a beautiful home.
It is, and it is an important place for photographers and filmmakers for generations to come. Congratulations, George Eastman House.
Golden anniversary has come along just once.
Thank you for joining us.
Good night.